have a good crowd out for our 2018 S.H. Phillips lecture in no-till agriculture. And I have a feeling we'll hear a bit more about Shirley Phillips before the day is out. But for those of you who may not be aware, Shirley was an extension specialist in our department many years ago and went on to serve as, I believe, an associate dean for extension at one time. And so was very instrumental in the early beginnings and the dissemination of information on no-till agriculture. So we developed this annual lecture series to honor those contributions. And over the years, we have invited in a number of speakers who have been involved in no-till agriculture throughout their careers. And so today we continue that tradition with Dr. Mark Alley, who is joining us here from Virginia. I didn't know until just recently that he's actually a Kentucky native, though. Grew up in Lawrence County on a small dairy farm. And yes, Jimmy, there were dairy farms in Lawrence County. Well, we discussed at one time maybe 50 some odd dairy farms in Lawrence County, as well as many other counties around the state. But he is a Kentucky native, went to Berea College for his undergraduate, and then to Virginia Tech for master's and bachelor's degree. I guess he liked Virginia Tech because he then hung around there for the next 32 years at the university, conducting research and extension on fertility, primarily in grain crop rotations, including no-till. And of course, that's one of the reasons that he's here. Since his retirement from Virginia Tech, he stayed in the business as an agronomic consultant, working on a variety of fertility issues, not just in Virginia, but across the nation and across the world, internationally as well. So quite a renowned expert in the area of fertility and in no-till. So if you would help me, please, in joining me in welcoming Dr. Mark Alley, our speaker for the 2018.
Is that how's the sound?
Yeah. Move it up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, let's try. Yeah, let's put it on tight. Let's test that. Thank you. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. I feel very honored and privileged to have this opportunity. I am a Kentucky native. We have lived in Virginia most of our life. I was gone for a couple of years after I did my degree. Was in Ohio, okay? So, well, and sometime in South Carolina. But the bulk of my professional career has been at Virginia Tech, teaching, research, extension, soil fertility management class, soil plant relations course. And when Bob called me about this, I said, Bob, I've got to think about this because, wait a minute, the no-till that's been done here at the University of Kentucky, I thought, wow, these guys have really done a lot of it. But it gave me an opportunity to look at some of the things. And in looking at a title for this presentation, I decided on the more than no-till, because I think when you examine some of the things that have come out of the no-till work here that was led initially by Mr. Shirley Phillips, there is more than just no-till. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of those things today as I think about that and have thought about it. And then the fact that this is a legacy. And I think particularly for the students to really think about a legacy, because we are all beneficiaries of the work that's gone before us. And a legacy is something of value. Shirley Phillips and his comrade in arms, if you will, we're going to talk about a few of those, have given us a legacy. One thing that need to point out here, and I'll ask a quiz, you know, I was a professor, so got to get quizzes. Anybody know who W.G. Weiser was? It's not a trick question, you know, Weiser, professor, no, it's not that. W.G. Weiser was the founder of Southern States in 1923. And if you get a chance to read what all it took to put that together, it's pretty amazing. But he's one of those people, like Shirley Phillips, that saw a need and did something about it. Well, let's see if I can get this to go here. Copy advance. Okay, I need some technical help. Okay. There we go. Okay. So what did Shirley Phillips see early part of his career? Well, I think he saw a lot of moldboard plowing. And you look at this guy's burying residue, so he has some reason to plow. This person has some reason he thought to bury this residue. Now this guy over here, I think it was just recreational tillage. I don't see anything else going on. But the point is, he saw this. What else did he see? He saw a lot of this disking. And if one looks at the one over here on the top left, okay, big heavy disc, really cool. First time I ever drove one of those, I thought, wow, this is nice. Now, I didn't know I was destroying the soil at the time, but hey, it was fun. Saw this, okay. We saw a lot of that. And a multitude of these different finishing tools. So he saw this. This was there. Saw chisel plows next. Okay, you get rid of moldboard plows because learning how to really moldboard plow is an art. I mean, it takes skill. And we went with these other material or these other tools. What did he also see? He also saw massive erosion. Now we still see this in too many places on too many fields. This was a problem. He also saw soil structure or soil with no structure. We take a look at this dispersed or puddled soil. That'd be a pretty good base if I was going to grow rice, paddy rice. This is a sandy coast plain here with no structure, eroded sand, soil, just really bad erosion. Now, here's one place where structure is not really wanted in soil. And that has to do with this peanut soil. This is referred to as cracking in peanuts. And these are Virginia type peanuts. So the big cocktail peanuts. Notice what the hole looks like on that. Bright tan, no streaks that come from organic matter. These soils will have, in many cases, less than 0.5% of organic matter. And it does not mineralize to give us anything. It is extremely stable. But this stage here in the growth where that peanut cracks through the soil is referred to in some herbicide applications that you time it at cracking. So that's about the only place I found structural soil is all right. The other thing, moisture stress he saw. A lot of these with pore stands, I could see up here, and this pointer is a challenge. Then we've got just moisture stress because we were not capturing the water. So, in summary, large equipment investment, tractors, tillage, equipment, plows, operators for the equipment, we have a lot of those people, difficult to plant timely less than optimum plant populations in many cases, soil degradation, and crops subject to drought stress. And you could probably find others. Now, what's one definition of insanity? Continue to do the same thing and expect a different result, even if the result is not the desired result. Well, how many acres have we plowed, and how many acres have we disced over the years? Millions. Millions. So anyway, Shirley Phillips saw this and said, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't keep doing the same thing. And he had this farmer, Mr. Harry Young, and this is a picture from the book. If you all have not read the book, I'll show you the reference. You can go to the library and get it, I'm sure. But Mr. Young planted 7/10 of an acre of no-till corn in 1962. And Shirley Phillips heard about it and was introduced and looked, and they started working together. Now, this is the kind of equipment they had to plant corn with, no-till. It's a two-row deal. You've got a no-till coulter here, seed hopper, opener underneath this, and this rubber-tired press wheel. Now, not a lot of residue, but it's no-till. Okay, so you got to start somewhere. Now, one thing that when you read about Shirley Phillips that he recognized was that a corn crop is not made by simply establishing a population. So there's no-tilling and putting the seed in the ground is not going to just automatically result in a crop. Now, this is a diagram that I've used over the years because I truly believe that as, in my case, soil fertility guy, if I didn't have some other really good people to work with in these other areas, I was not going to figure out what my response to fertilizer was. So when I try to summarize all this, if we look at corn yields, it's made up of kernels per ear, kernel weight, and ears per acre. And we multiply those together. Now, if we look at the yield building factors, variety selection, all our genetics, plant nutrition, you know, that one's big and it says pop. Okay? All right, there's a method to that. And then we have precision planting, which is rate, depth, timeliness, that all go into building a yield. Now you say, what's the one that's obvious that's not on there? Quiz time. Water, moisture. I don't put water in this diagram simply because for an individual field, I have what I have. I either have irrigation or I don't have irrigation. I either have good rainfall or I don't have good rainfall. That just happens. Now, these other factors, weed control, insect control, disease control, logic control, harvest management, these are yield protecting factors. They will not make any more yield that I have not built. They will allow me to capture yield, and they become very economically important. But if I don't build that yield to start with, then I don't have anything to protect. So, Shirley Phillips understood this. And a team is a symbol. And if we look at the report that Bob pointed me to, we find that these people, and this report was written in 1981, this is a team of people. S.H. Phillips, R.L. Blevins, and Grant Thomas, soil adaptability. Ron Phillips, soil moisture. Grant Thomas, Ken Wells. Lloyd Murdoch, Lloyd, if you're out there at Princeton, hello. Fertilization and lining. Gregory of Rainey, pest and their control, insect management. Dick Stuckey, disease incidence severity. Wilbur Fry, J.M. Walker, G.A. Duncan. Comparison of energy requirements. The late 70s were a time of great energy problems in this country. Now, here, E.M. Smith, Machinery and Power Requirements. This is the one Virginia guy. Easley Smith, Ag Engineering at Virginia Tech, and he participated in this. Bill Witt, Weed Control and No Tillage, and Rican Lau, who was working at the CG Center in Africa at the time, and they brought him in to write about the use of the no-till techniques in tropical soils, because they recognized very quickly that there was a great opportunity there. So there's the thing. Now there's these early season references, the first book they wrote in 1973. Then Harry Young revised that in 1982. That was published by No-Till Farmer. And who knows the editor of No-Till Farming? Who knows?
Josh knows.
Josh?
Jack Lessiter.
Frank Lessiter.
Frank.
Yeah, got the name right. Now, this guy recognized early on. And I will tell you, if you want to go to a meeting, the national meeting, no-till conference they have every year. It's either in Indianapolis or it's out in Iowa. First time I went, I was assigned an 8 p.m. in the evening time slot for my talk. Conference started at 8 o'clock in the morning. Oh my goodness. But why am I up here? You know, why am I going to do this? There were 300 people in the audience at 8 o'clock at night, and they'd been going all day. This is one of the most attentive audiences I've ever been to. So I would say if you ever have a chance to go to a no-till conference, even if it's just for a day, that Frank Lasser runs, go. You'll be impressed with the people trying to learn about what's going on. So these references are there. And this is the reference report that Bob has, a PDF that he can send to you, or send you the address to it. That really is an interesting observation of what they put together early on. Really good job. So what is no-till? Well, you know, we've got these openers here that road cleaners, openers under there with the gauge wheel, seed comes down, and you close it up. And you see this nice plant stand, soybeans here, new planters, get bigger, faster, all that. Then we come over here, planting into a different environment, planting green with a lot of residue. So we have a lot of different problems or different situations. But we're basically coming into a residue layer with no mixing. That is what we're seeing there. So, scientific got to share a little data. So we were looking at changes in carbon and nitrogen in no-till systems. Well, we want to look at that. Well, what makes better soil structure? What makes better infiltration? It's if we are conserving carbon and nitrogen. And we want to measure carbon sequestration. That is something that we have a lot of interest in, a lot of people, and a lot of crop modeling, and a lot of environmental modeling. And also emissions trading. Now, we've been through this thing about 10 years ago. It didn't really work, but it may come back. So it's important to know what's going on there. So we looked at corn, wheat, double crop, soybean rotation, tillage management, either continuous no-till, or as we're starting to hear now, never till. Okay, got one guy that's got a license plate, never till. He really believes in it, and that's what they're doing. So other tillage had some periodic tillage, but basically we're looking either that tillage up there that was in ahead of the wheat, and then this was the no-till. Okay, we had 3 soil series of Bojack loamy sand. This is good for playing beach volleyball on. It's one of our really deep sands. Usually the only reason you farm it is in the tract of land that you rent, and you have to use it because it comes with the farm. Then we had the Emporia and Alta Vista. This has a good sandy clay loam subsoil. These are quite productive. And we had duration of continuous no-till was 0 to 14 years. And we had 41 sites with a history of biosolids. And I said, why do you have a history of biosolids? We adjoin Washington, D.C. And the Blue Plains water treatment plant puts out a lot of biosolids from that government. Okay. Gotta think about that one. So we took 5 cores on 100-meter transects, and we had 3 depths that we were taking it from bulk density, total carbon and nitrogen, and we were calculating carbon stratification, which is your surface 1 inch to the 3 to 6 inches. Okay. So the relationship, this comes from Alan Franzluber's. He's done a lot of really good work on this measure of soil quality. We talked this morning about how do we measure soil quality. Well, this carbon stratification is something that we can get helps us in looking at what is occurring. Are we getting this carbon deposited? Because this is what's going to help our aggregation, water infiltration, and this carbon is going to be sequestered there and reduce erosion and so forth. So looking at his work, he had 0.19 tons of carbon per acre per year. The other reason to quantify this is if we have an emissions trading program, California's still trying to do that. They're trying to establish a market. We have to be able to value what is the quantification in order to value it. And one of our goals was to verify this for Virginia conditions. So if we look at the data, and this is something that when I first saw this data, I said, John Spargo did this work. I said, John, that R-square value is not very strong up there, buddy. He was working on his PhD with me. And he said, well, this is what it is. And, you know, it's on-farm data. It came right out of the field. We selected the soils very carefully, done the sampling very carefully. Guess what? It's highly variable. But if we're going to be looking over landscapes, it's going to be variable. So anyway, what we have on the carbon stratification here is this ratio of 2 is what Alan set up is when we get above 2, then we're starting to see some improvement in infiltration rates, soil structure, and so forth. And what we can see is if we get out here to 8 to 10 years of this continuous no-till, we're starting to see that value go above 3. So really quite a significant change. Now, the dashed lines here are for the biosolids, and we've got a little steeper line on this bojack. The red squares are for the bojack because it is an exception, it's problem child. But if you add biosolids into that very sandy soil and you cut out tillage, the changes in the surface occur more quickly, which our soil scientists would all say, hey, we know that. Okay, but we had to quantify it a little bit. Then if we look at putting this together for the total carbon, it all averaged out about 0.15 tons of carbon per acre per year. And so we feel pretty good about that. And on the nitrogen, we were putting together about 20 pounds of N per acre per year. So if you come out there 10 years, you're going to have about 200 more pounds of nitrogen. Now, what's going to happen to it? Okay, we need our microbiologists and all the other people in this audience that's going to start telling us how this is going to work for us. But it's not being lost into the environment. So, improve soil quality, conserve organic matter, give us some quantification of what's going on, and conserve it. Potentially, it may increase efficiency. We'll have to see. Now, looked at this, again, I went back to Blevins' long-term tillage study that Bob sent me. You know, he's a professor. I mean, he sent me my homework to do. And so I've done my homework here, okay? At least I hope so. So if we looked at this long-term plot, fertilizer, nitrogen, and the tillage from 1970 to 1984 and the no-till versus conventional, not a whole lot of difference. And we're topping out about 100 pounds of N on that, excuse me. Whereas we come from 2002 to 2016, what we do is the no-till is separated to higher yields, and we have gone up where optimum N rate is going to be somewhere around 150. So what's changed in all that time?
Carbon.
Carbon. Genetics has also changed. If we think about what's going on with corn hybrids, they haven't grown the same corn hybrid on this from 1970. So there are differences here, and that's why I think this data was segregated like this in the report. But we have this separation, so yes, it looks like we are using nitrogen more efficiently from those studies. Now, but it took 34 years of no-till to get to the point what we were seeing in that data. Now, one of the things that we had a number of years ago is low input agriculture. How many of you folks remember that? Yeah, there's a few of you. Even Chad remembers that. He's too young for that. But anyway.
You'll hear about it.
Yeah. The idea was that we just needed to reduce our input so we wouldn't have an environment. We saw some strange things going on with very low yields being put out there. If we have low crop yields, how much biomass do we have to go on the soil? We don't have much. So I truly believe that high yielding, high biomass crops provide residue, and I know they do, and increase organic matter levels, and we should never apologize for those high yields. All right? We need to be working for those, because if we can get more yield off of less land, then we can protect more land that we don't have to use. So we can do a seminar on that if we want to. But that gives us a residue problem in terms of planting on no-till. And so what we see on some of our gigantic machines now, particularly on these corn heads, is putting these chopper rolls inside the head so that when that stalk is pulled through, the ear is snapped off, then we wind up with corn stalks chopped up into small pieces. And this eliminates some of the tillage that people have been doing to chop up this residue. Same thing, we've got to, in our other grain crops, we've got to have good spread of that residue, otherwise we wind up with a lot of non-uniformity. So if we look at planting no-till, and this is going to tie into something else here in a minute, we see this environment, planting after soybeans. How much residue over there? Not much. Cotton is even worse. All you got is a little stalk left that cotton grows. Then you've got this other thing here with this big rye cover crop that's pretty high. Carbon nitrogen ratio on that is going to be higher. It's going to be one higher than small rye. What about the carbon nitrogen ratio in this? Probably pretty high. And then we come over here to our veg. So they are not similar environments. Very different. We have to understand these environments for our implications with fertilizers. Now, we talked about similar thing this morning in the Rhizosphere lab that Rebecca here, we really appreciated that tour. But I guess all of us as scientists would like to have a classic paper like this, because I don't know how many times I've seen this. But root growth responses to zones of nutrient enrichment. If we look at high N, high P, high K, in these zones, all three zones, you get this root growth. If we go to low phosphorus, high phosphorus, low phosphorus, these are barley roots. That's what we see. There's a biochemical feedback mechanism that find those nutrients, boom, expand. If we come over here with nitrate, low in the surface, high here, root expansion, low. Look at ammonia, high here, low here, high, low. Potassium, it doesn't make any difference. I don't care about potassium. So, but we know that we have this type of crop response. The team that was working on fertility with Shirley Phillips understood this too. And if you look, I hate to do a slide like this, but I wanted to put just what they wrote. Since phosphorus is such an immobile nutrient, there is no great concern about it leaching from the root zone. In fact, it is so immobile. The greatest concern when it's needed is to place it in a position so that plant roots can absorb it. As explained previously, broadcast surface applications of phosphorus have been shown to be efficient because one, plant roots feed at the soil surface mulch contact and no tillage. And a broadcast surface application is in reality a horizontal vein. Okay? And results in less soil fixation of fertilizer, phosphorus, and applications which are mixed into and with the soil. This is Grant Thomas, Ken Wells, Lloyd Murdoch, 1981, no tillage research reports and reviews. Right on target. Okay. Now, what do we know today? And what do we see today? And what's some of our challenges, even where we have a lot of no-till? My part of the world that I've worked in, over here in the Chesapeake Bay, right here is the bay, DC is up there. We're out here, our major cropping agricultural areas are either east of the bay here, but in this coastal plain area. There's also a huge poultry industry on that eastern shore. Josh knows all about that. He's worked in it greatly. We also know what's happened in Lake Erie, that problem, and the Mississippi River Basin. So we say, wait a minute, phosphorus is immobile. Is it? At the time that initial work was done, it's like I was teaching in my soil fertility class, as I was taught that it is immobile. Okay? And nobody could conceive that we would buy enough phosphate fertilizer to raise it to a level where it might not be immobile. But what did we do? Well, here's a standard application of manure. And this is on a nice no-till where the cover crop's been, then kill down, spray that manure out there, plant corn. But what we found out was in that manure, for example, we could raise in this surface zone here. I've seen a number of phosphorus levels that might be 800 parts per million. This changes all the chemistry of the whole situation. So times change, problems are different, even though we think we really know all about this. And at the time we do, but things do change. So what we've come out is we have phosphorus-based nutrient management plans. We also have this injection of the manure, that surface residue, so that we get the phosphorus into a soil zone where it is immobilized and it's not going to be moving off in the surface runoff. Now, what we do though is we don't want to create 800 parts per million phosphorus level soil. We're not doing that. We're doing this to keep from creating those zones. Same thing with nitrogen. We look at the nitrogen cycle. All of you can write the nitrogen cycle. You know, it takes about 2 minutes. Bill Ron at Oklahoma State has a little card that he gives his students that can write this in a certain amount of time, and they're known as a nitrogen ninja. Okay, so, yeah, but we need to understand this. And the thing about it is, our knowledge of this basic process, of all these processes, then allows us to determine what is needed in a specific environment. But if we don't understand this, we're just applying rates and say, let's see what happens. That's not what we want to do. So if we're in a no-till situation, okay, we're going to have plant residues up here. We're going to have volatilization from surface application. We're going to have the potential for immobilization. And then we get this stuff down here into the soil, the organic nitrogen, we've got ammonia, we've got nitrate, we can leach some of it. The question becomes, what is the most prevalent and major things going on in a particular environment? Fertilization practices. Okay, we looked at, when we looked at the potential for runoff, even with no-till, we came to the conclusion that we needed to be banding below the surface residue. And so we were looking at the starter fertilizer applications going on 2 inches off the row and 2 inches below the seed. What we found in that work in trials, that if we had starter bands of N 10, 20, 30, we had started with 10, using ammonium polyphosphate 10-34-0. And then we could go out here and increase it to 20, to 30 pounds total, and then come down here to 50, and then 70 in a 2x2 band. The percent nitrogen in the corn tissue at 12 to 14 and 15 inches, 60 pounds of N broadcast plus 10 pounds in the starter band gave us a little above 3%, whereas we could do 30 pounds in that starter band beside the row, and we had more. Now, does this fit with what we know about the nitrogen, even spraying it out over all the residue or putting it in a band? Yeah, it fits all, checks all the boxes. We did 10 sites, and what we found on these experiments that are optimum N rates here, 66, 70, 49, 40, 70. The powder is always high. Our side dress N rates, the optimum, 0, 125. Much more variability. Now, the other thing, look at these yield levels. Okay, this work was done in the early 90s. The point that I'm sharing with you here is those higher rates here than we normally expect, and these are placed as a starter band. Why is that reasonable? It's reasonable because once we decide to grow corn, if we do not establish it well early, then we lose yield potential. That doesn't mean that we want to go out and put on top of nitrogen just as broadcast, because when we look at our environment, then we're going to lose a lot of efficiency. Optimum side dress is going to vary because our yield potentials vary with the weather. So this was just, yeah, when you think about it, it looks pretty reasonable. And so we looked at you look at these early seasons or early no-till planters. You know how you tell it's really early equipment? No cab on the tractor. But they've got starter fertilizer tanks. We look here later on, we've got our bigger planters out to about 12, 16 minutes. Yep, got starter fertilizer. Now, we've gone to these monster planters now. And so this work it needs to be redone because these planters are too big to put a 2x2 starter on, placement, equipment changes. And we're getting these low rate directly on the seed placement, but we don't have any good work about what the rates are and how that can happen. So again, changes in the industry with consolidation of farms comes back to us agronomists as needing to reassess based on our known principles of immobilization, volatilization, root growth, etc., to keep up with the time. All right, now let's get a little bit to the legacy part. Conservation agriculture, the FAO model or paradigm. Need to use a big word here this afternoon. Okay, get that paradigm in there. Article published here in 2018, and this guy, Amar Hassan, he's at the University of Reading, but he works a lot with FAO. Principle 1, continuous no or minimum mechanical soil disturbance. Okay, no-till checks that box. We got that one. Permanent biomass soil mulch cover residue recover crops. Well, we've got some of those if we're growing a significant amount of a rye cover crop or a big vetch cover crop. But if we're putting soybean residue back there and that's all there is, or cotton residue, then I'd say we don't check that box. So a lot of work here in this area to be done, I think. And diversification of crop species. Now, I think this is one of which we're a little weak. Now we're a whole lot weak in a lot of areas. Let's just be honest. How this one works out, we'll have to see. But the point is, look where this has gone since Harry Young and Shirley PHILLIPS and the team that was put together has taken this. Because we can assume that all this is no-till, all right? Maybe it doesn't have everything else. But the point here is we've gone from 1974 at 0 and up to 180 million hectares in conservation agriculture. And if we look at the different areas of the world, according to this 2018 article, what we have here is in South America, basically 63% of their land area, of their cropland area is no-till or conservation agriculture. North America, we're about 28. Australia and New Zealand, about 45. Asia, very low. Of course, you got all the rice production there, so you know that. Although there is, I've got a colleague I know that sent me a picture of a no-till wheat rice, no-till wheat and a wheat rice rotation in India. Now these guys in Russia and the Ukraine, they like to till. They like to plow. Europe, same way. Amazing plows over there. I mean, big equipment. Africa, we see very little. This is one Pedro Sanchez gave from retired from the Earth Institute, Columbia University. Pedro did an analysis of this situation, that in that savanna area of Africa, this could be the next Brazil as far as no-till development and a place where Africa can become self-sufficient in food production. Now, it's going to take some technology, but if you look at the soils, and well, we've got a lot of technology. It's going to take political will, infrastructure development, and that type of thing. But this is something to look at and be aware of. Maybe some great opportunities out there, students. Have to look and see. So we see that legacy of conservation agriculture. All right, what else is a legacy that S.H. Phillips left us? Sustainability. How many people have talked about sustainability? Yeah. about it? Yeah. We think it's all really good, isn't it? But then we have some people in agriculture, we've had discussions about really what does that mean? Well, let's talk a little bit about what it means. It's capable of being sustained, related to, or being a method of harvesting, using a resource so that the resource is not depleted or permanently damaged. Like what we do when we no-till, we keep that soil in place. We hopefully are reducing erosion and so forth. Now, particularly with sustainable development, the United Nations had this committee put together, and they published Our Common Future, 1987. My goodness, that's ancient history. Yeah, but I say to you that it is still applicable today. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, folks, I have a hard time arguing against that. And I think we're in a situation where we have to be aware of our recommendations. And I know professionals here that practice for a while realize this, but I'll tell the students to think about the scariest thing that you're going to face is when you make a recommendation for somebody to change a major practice on their farm and they do it. Okay? Now, I can remember a couple of recommendations I made that weren't so good. And those are still imprinted on my mind. So you got to go out there and be bold and do what's right, but be sure you're well grounded in what you're doing. All right, so sustainability has 3 pillars. Okay, it's got the social, the economic, and the environmental. Equilateral triangle, 3 legs of the stool. Understand if it's not correct, okay? I first did this talk, I gave this talk on sustainability at the Fertilizer Industry Roundtable. That was an interesting group to talk to about sustainability. These are the guys that have big fertilizer plants, the mines, so forth. But my colleague from Europe sent me this one after he heard my talk. He said, you need to think about this, Mark. He said, United States, this is the way your sustainability triangle is. Economic, yeah, and you get back to and social is not much. Then you come over to Europe, it's social, economic, not much, environmental, definitely short. But the point is, we do have these 3, and why do I put these up here? We have been very concerned about economics, and rightly so. What's 2 prime examples of agricultural production not being economic? History lesson. We got 2. Do we have a Soviet Union anymore? No, the breakup of the Soviet Union, they couldn't feed their people. And there was no economics incentives in it for the farmers to do better. And the great leap forward in China's history. Okay, no economic incentive, land was taken away from the farmers, and you had a top-down, didn't matter what you did. People starved to death. Okay, so there has to be some economics in there. Environmental, well, in places where civilizations have been destroyed or have gone away because they've lost the soil resource. Now the social thing, well, I don't know about that one. But let me give you an example of where I think this is going. Agricultural sustainability, we've got to look at agroecosystems that can produce the needed food. All right, that has to happen in perpetuity. We cannot degrade. We cannot be making recommendations that degrade our resource, and perhaps enhance the ecosystem services. Okay, this is something that clean water, clean air, carbon and nutrient cycling, biodiversity, and so forth. But the realities are that we have the need for increased food production. Now, looking at grain prices today, I couldn't argue that one very much, okay? But anyway, over time, we're going to need food. The quantity and the quality of food, as we're having increased incomes in the world, the demand is going up for food that requires more grain, etc. Less land per person, less fresh water per person, and then we have to be aware of these impacts of these agricultural practices. We cannot defend recommendations to increase the efficiency of a farm at the expense of the water or the people living in the neighborhood. Okay, we can't defend it. We might make it. I hope I don't make it. But the point is, we cannot defend it because it's not sustainable. All right, opportunities and challenges. In all of these problems, we've got a lot of different things that we can look at. Students and professors should all be aware. And I'm kind of heavy on soil tilling, soil testing, and fertilizer stuff. Placement, we've got geospatial stuff going on. And with our soil testing, our nutrients and genetics and all the things that we deal with. Getting into this context of how we create this sustainable system. Now, there's going to be tremendous opportunity here. Now, Shirley Phillips saw reduce the erosion. I didn't talk to him and ask him about that, but when I read the stuff, moisture conservation, erosion reduction, that, okay, he's hitting on it. Now, our challenge and our opportunity are these other areas to go along with that. And one of the things that's new is this digital platform. How many people have heard about everybody's going to have a digital platform? Nope, haven't heard about it. Nope, nobody heard about it. Well, then it's a good thing I've got the next slide. All right, what are these digital platforms that are being out there? These model plant growth and agroecosystems for the purpose of making field-specific, season-specific recommendations for various inputs. And there's a lot of people who think there's going to be a lot of economic incentive to do this. If we look at some of the ones that are being marketed now, FieldView, that's Climate Corporation, it's owned by the Bayer, or Bayer if you're in Germany, okay? So in surface services, this is Corteva AgriScience. The used to be its Ag Division DuPont Pioneer. And then we have Adapt-In, which is a nitrogen model that's owned by Yara, came out of Cornell. And the point of these is to use the computing power and our ability to collect data and model it. Now, I've had my first opportunity in the last 4 years to work with data scientists. And they are some really bright people that do a lot of good work, but they don't know soil chemistry, they don't know genetics of our crop plants, they don't know weed science, and you can just go on. So they can find a lot of relationships, but does it make sense or does it not? So there's going to be opportunities here. Now these are all reactive systems in that you're following the weather, they're weather driven. And the idea is that you make the changes to optimize your inputs and your crop yield for the season on each individual field. We'll see where they get there with it, but there are literally millions of dollars being put into this. It's going forward. So the other thing about sustainability is a social thing. I've not seen, other than the general water quality thing about social. This is one that is happening now in North Carolina. this is the situation. These are hog houses, and these are lagoons that hold the waste from the hog houses. And this has been very economic for Smithfield Foods and for some farmers that own these. It's been very good for the grain market in that area. You can talk about at least 50 to 60 cent premium on corn over what you get in your corn bill. So, good economic. Now the question is, you see the size of this and you see this land area. Now how many years can you put hog manure out there? And this is just spray it out. This grass was mowed and baled. And many years there was no market for it because there's so much Bermuda grass hay in the area that there's not enough cattle to eat it. So, right, that was taken over here and put in the woods. That's the recycling. So there's an environmental situation here. Now the other thing that has just come down is Smithfield Foods, which is the processor, hog feeder. They just had a $200 million lawsuit for a neighborhood that was affected by this hog lagoon being out here and spray irrigating. Now, what's come together from this is Walmart, who is the largest buyer of Smithfield pork, said we got to be more sustainable, and they've come together with Smithfield Foods on a sustainability initiative. And the idea of what's going to happen, they partnered with a company called Anudia Nutrient that has a patented process to react bio-type phosphorus compounds to make a fertilizer. That is a 1424, and it's going to be like a 19S. Okay, so it'll have nitrogen, phosphorus that they're going to capture from the solids in this hog lagoon and make it into a commercial fertilizer that you can put into the fertilizer tray. I've seen some of it, looks pretty good. We'll have to see. The point is, this process is enabling this, what we call a circular economy, where you have the livestock, it's food for us, we come down, we process the biosolids out of there, make it into fertilizer, and go back to the cropland. So the question is, this is being socially driven as well as environmental. If it was just flat economics for the hog feeder or the grain trade, it would not be done. So I think we're at a point where we're going to see those other two pillars of sustainability become very important to our agricultural landscape. So I want to conclude with this from the write-up for Shirley Phillips membership, the University of Kentucky Hall of Distinguished Alumni. And I thought it said very well. He started a revolution among his colleagues in the UK Department of Agronomy. That department eventually became the world leader in research in no-till crop production. And I think if he's with us today, his advice would be, particularly to the students, go out and start a revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the honor of being here.
Time for questions?
I didn't do that what I wanted to do. Speechless.
So in your graph, 1992, the year after I came here, suddenly no-till takes off.
You're here.
I don't think that's quite the reason. So what do you think was the dynamic that really caused that utilization of no-till to increase on a national?
Well, in in looking at other trends, with where there needs to be widespread adoption, I think probably just reached a critical mass of dissemination. Now, if I go back into the late 1980s, and I don't know if that date is a lag time, but if you go to 88, 89, tremendous depression in the economics of grain crop production in the United States. In Virginia, we saw a massive movement to no-till. And then the final massive movement was in 2007, 2008, in the recession. We're probably 95% now. But just the economic reality, and this is why I haven't stood a lot of the stuff I see in the Corn Belt, how you still pay for the tillage. Ours was because the farmers survived. Now, how much of that worldwide thing, I'd have to go back and look at the data, although generally those price recessions for grain crops are, worldwide market. So you take Australia, New Zealand, you take Canada, and of course Brazil. They've never had enough money coming in. They just started with it and said, we gotta save it. But there's still a lot of acres out there that aren't no-till, and I'm not sure why.
Do you think there's any effect of the adoption that's about the same time as the Roundup Ready GMO, first generation GMO crops, that made no-till a little bit easier maybe?
Well, it made it a whole lot easier. I mean, anybody that ever did weed control in soybeans before you had Roundup, we'd have cocktails, 4 or 5 different herbicides, and we'd burn them and all that. I think that's definitely one of the characters one of the reasons supporting that is a Roundup Ready crop. I would agree. Josh.
Just an observation, and I'd ask your opinion on it. I wondered the exact same thing the question you just posed. How did they continue to till in the Midwest? When on the East Coast, Maryland, Virginia, Delaware, we saw rapid adoption in the mid-'80s.
Right.
And I wonder if it's not the capturing value from burning up that organic matter. They're getting more nitrogen out tilling with higher organic matter, so there's a value there to them that we didn't have in our soils, perhaps.
Well, it could very well be because yields have increased rather dramatically, but fertilizer nitrogen consumption in North America is flat. So as these corn yields have gone up, but could be, Josh. Could very well be. Yes.
So, like Europe and Asia and Africa is part of the reason why they're slow to adopt no-till because of GMOs, or are there other reasons?
No, I think the question is why are some of these regions like Asia and Europe slow to adopt the no-till? Well, one of the things I've seen in Europe is you look at the areas that are growing a lot of cereals, very high yields, a lot of residue, and a climate that's wet, cool, so it doesn't decompose very quickly. And so the tendency is let's bury it because you're harvesting that crop in August and you're coming back and planting the next one in September. So that's part of the problem. And the other thing is disease. If you're growing cereals like three courses of wheat, and then you go to barley. That's a change, and then maybe we'll throw some canola in there. These are all winter crops, but that's part of the reason. And then in Asia, smallholder farming is part of it. So how do you no-till the equipment to do it? Now we see in some of the subsistence agriculture is where it's hand planting. There's work, and again, Bill Ron's been doing this with his agri-engineer group, a hand planter that has a mechanism to put one seed in one place and a measured small amount of fertilizer, and it uses a 2-inch PVC pipe as the holder for the fertilizer and the seed, and just jam it down through there. So otherwise, how do you get it out, and how do you control the weeds? Doing it by hand. Well, you can do that. Okay. But education, as well as those other concerns. But the true answer is I really don't know. You know, there's some possible reasons out there.
Mark, if you wouldn't mind asking Princeton if they have any questions?
Hello, Princeton. Question, did I put y'all to sleep?
They're asleep.
There's a bunch of us here, Mark. Thank you.
Any questions from Princeton or not right now?
None right now that I know of, unless my colleagues have one.
Well, Mark, I'd like to say, I don't know, but I think that the increase in the late 80s and in the 90s on no tillage was also due to the 1985 Farm Bill, which tied farm payments to conservation tillage. And also, the bigger the people got, the less time the farms got, the less time they had to do this tillage, and the more attractive no tillage became also.
Repeat it, Bart.
Okay, that's Lloyd.
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
It's good to see you. We'll have to go for another trip in London.
Yeah. Yeah.
The answer was, considering the change in no-till in those late 80s, early 90s, Lloyd indicated it had to do with two factors. He thought, one, the consolidation of farms, more acreage, less labor. This allowed you to get that work done. And then the Farm Bill that had conservation payments associated with it. So it helped a lot of farmers to change from the tillage to the no-till. I would agree, Lloyd.
Any other questions? Okay, well then it's time for us to thank Mark for coming to talk to us and delivering this talk. I believe you're the 8th recipient of the Shirley Phillips Distinguished Lecture.
Wow.
And so thank you very much and for coming and sharing with us.
Okay, well, thank you.